Ted Cruz is with us. Senator, great to have you. This is a full takeover. I think Bill Maher is right. What are your thoughts?
We're going to get to Hurricane Melissa after this.
Prisons are set up in our society, I would argue that they do not work. They do not make us safer. The instinct is to just take that person, the source of that harm, the source of that issue, and then just throw them away. Put them is to just take that person, the source of that harm.
When Richard Nixon said, "I am not a crook."
The best you can do is try to reframe the conversation in a way that people will be more open-minded to your position. A fundamental fact that a lot of left advocates forget, which is that just because you are correct doesn't mean other people will reflect on your words. Okay? That's why one must always remember the educational journey that they went through. For some, it's not as big as a swing as going from right to socialism. Okay, maybe some were liberals and then they found themselves in the throes of socialist literature. But for many others, this is, once again, something that they've been aggressively propagandized against. So you have to do your very best to reframe the language in a way that is more appropriate for people to accept. That's it.
Look, I think the Democrat Party has lost their minds. I got to say, I was amused listening to AOC say, "We're not crazy, we're sane." It reminded me of an old friend of mine who talked about what she called bimbo eruptions, which is whenever anyone says, "I am not a bimbo," what does everyone think? You're a bimbo. When Richard Nixon said, "I am not a crook," all of America said, "You know what? He's a crook." In this instance, when AOC stands up and says, "We're not crazy," the rest of America says, "You're crazy." And methinks she doth protest too much.
Yeah, just like when Ted Cruz says, "I'm not a racist," everybody knows you definitely are. "I'm not the Zodiac killer." Everybody's like, okay, well, that's what the Zodiac killer would say. There is a little bit of a truth in what Ted Cruz is saying here. It's not wrong when you do find yourself on the defense. When you do find yourself defending ridiculous slanders and smears, people end up, you offer legitimacy to it. But of course, no one is ever going to ask Ted Cruz, especially on Fox News, how that works with Donald Trump running around being like, I'm not racist. I'm not a dictator. I'm not Jeffrey Epstein's best friend who has been routinely pictured with Jeffrey Epstein, who is my best friend, you know?
Look at Comrade Mamdani, and that's how I call him, as Comrade Mamdani. It is amazing to see New Yorkers vote for someone who is an open communist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. He's talking about government seizing the means of production. He's talking about massive tax increases and putting the government in charge of the economy. And he is a jihadist. This is someone who went and...
By the way, I fucking wish. How could he do that in the New York mayoral race? I don't know, but could you imagine? Centrally planned economy in the United States of America, a robust industrial base, reshoring initiatives, good wages, more worker control, more autonomy in the workplace, all under the directive of a Democratic Party.
Did a photo op with an unindicted co-conspirator.
Yeah, that's my favorite. Hassan, Ted hates communists. They tortured his father, except they were not communists. It was Batista who tortured his father, ironically enough. Him and Marco Rubio both. Him and Marco Rubio both constantly fucking do that. Bro, you're clickbaiting? You mean you wish he was a communist, not a jihadist? Wait, what? Is that what he said? I was talking about what would jihad have anything to do with central planning? Chatters. Clip culture gonna cook you, bro. Please. Famous aspect of a jihad is when you do central planning, a central planned economy. Wait, what the fuck? Is there a blip? Doesn't matter. It's all over Facebook now. Okay, guys, stop begging for the fucking clips to come, please.
Sir, of the World Trade Center bombing. This is someone who his reaction from 9/11 is not the 3,000 people who were murdered, not the NYPD officers and the New York Fire Department officers who charged into the flames and lost their lives. It was his auntie apparently felt bad. This is dangerous. And I got to say, Sean, there are some Republicans who are saying, okay, good. Let them elect a communist in New York. That's going to help Republicans across the country. I got to say I'm not in that camp. New York is an incredibly important American scene. It is the center of finance in America. It is the center of much of media in America. And having one of the most important American cities controlled by a whacked out leftist. And by the way, the whole party has now lined up behind this commie jihadist. And so I am hoping there is some reservoir of common sense in New York that says, let's not go that far. You're right. New Jersey is encouraging. I think we can win the gubernatorial race in New Jersey. And I think Virginia, look, Virginia, what's on the ballot there, you've got their AG candidate who in writing mused about how much he wants to murder the children or see the children of his political opponents.
Yeah, if these guys were so stoked about Zohran's electoral victory and what it means for the future of the Democratic Party, if the Democratic Party was forced to reckon with the left populist flank and run more leftist candidates, and how that would have down ticket consequences for the National Party, a negative down ticket consequence for the National Party, then they wouldn't be crying about Zohran this hard. They would be excited. They would literally say, oh, Zohran's going to be great. Love it. They would say, oh, we don't like any Democrat, but if they chose Zohran, they chose Zohran, right? Except Donald Trump literally wants Andrew Cuomo to win the New York mayoral race. Okay? Donald Trump has actively tried to throw hurdles in the direction of the New York mayoral race, claiming if Zohran wins, he's going to cut funds to New York. Like, that is insane. Obviously, if they truly weren't worried and if they were excited at the prospect of Zohran becoming a face of the Democratic Party, they wouldn't be going this crazy against them.
Murdered. That is extreme and radical. And I got to say, I believe in a reservoir of common sense in our country.
All right. So his father's quoted in the New York Post as saying that Nazis took their cues from the United States, history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, official racism and concentration camps. Linda Sarsour, that radical. You mentioned this imam that he's friends with.
Yeah, Linda Sarsour is another key figure here that they're talking about. They're trying to get Zohran to sister soldier like all of these people, myself included. Ironically enough, they can't, it's not really working that much. But what's crazy about this, okay, they're referencing this clip about his dad, for the record. If you actually listen to what he says, you can find every detail here on Wikipedia. None of this is controversial among people who've read books. If you want to describe it as the root of all evil, that's on you. Zohran Mamdani here is only laying out facts, not judgment.
America is the genesis of what we call settler colonialism. And the American model was exported all around the world. Abraham Lincoln generalized the solution of reservations. They herded American Indians into separate territories. For the Nazis,
By the way, this is not even remotely controversial in academia. But that is the problem. Dude, look at that one little light that is just hitting Kaya in the face. Just one little beam of light. That's so funny. This clip is wild. My dad acted outraged at such a ridiculous notion that I sent him a breath of hard academic evidence of Hitler's 1928 speech where he said this, and he was like, America's not evil, just moving the goalposts and reiterating into his shell. Yeah. What's so fucking crazy is like, this is a crisis of intelligence. This is a crisis of critical thinking. That's what's going on here, where we look to people whose primary function is educating the masses, people who are infinitely better read than the average person, talking about something that they know a million times more about. And we just go, how dare you say this thing that is objectively the truth? It is not a secret that the Nazis looked to America for advice, looked to America for what to do. That is just the objective truth. And yet, when you state historical facts, because the overwhelming majority of people now do not give a fuck about historical facts at all, and instead think about their own personal feelings, there is significant motion in these kinds of counter narratives being launched against the candidate whose father is an academic.
this was the inspiration. Hitler realized two things. One, that genocide was doable. It is possible to do genocide. That's what Hitler realized. Second thing Hitler realized is that you don't have to have a common citizenship. You can differentiate between people. The Nuremberg laws were patterned after American laws. Anyway, the US put Indians in reservations. The US invented the model.
Isn't most of Americans uneducated enough to fall to this hook, line, and sinker? Yes. This is historically correct information. That's what's so crazy about it. That is what's so fucking crazy about it. Zohran Mamdani's father, America's the root of all evil and inspiration for the Nazis. First of all, you said that. He didn't say that. He said it was the genesis. The American reservation structure was the genesis for the Nazis. And it's literally openly talked about in Nazi texts. He notes that in Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress towards primarily racial conception of citizenship by excluding certain races from naturalization. Whitman writes that the discussion of such influences is almost taboo because the crimes of the Third Reich are commonly defined as the nefandum, the unspeakable descent into what we often call radical evil. But the kind of genocidal hatred that erupted in Germany had been seen before and has been seen since. Only by stripping away its national regalia and comprehending its essential human form do we have any hope of vanquishing it. That concept is precisely what makes it impossible for Zionists to contend with their own fascism. Okay? The unspeakable descent into what we often call radical evil is precisely the reason why people still to this day, when you say, well, Israel behaves exactly like Nazi Germany, they freak the fuck out. They're like, how dare you say that? It's the vast literature on Hitler and Nazism keeps circling around a few enduring questions. The first is biographical. How did an Austrian watercolor painter turned military orderly emerge as a far-right German rabble-rouser after the First World War? The second is sociopolitical. How did a civilized society come to embrace Hitler's extreme ideas? The third has to do with the intersection of man and regime. To what extent was Hitler in control of the apparatus of the Third Reich? All these questions point to the central enigma of the Holocaust, which has variously been interpreted as a premeditated action and as a barbaric improvisation. Those are the two mainline schools of thought about the Holocaust. Was the final solution always supposed to be the final solution, or was it brought about as conditions worsened for Nazi Germany in the battle lines? Okay. In our current age of unapologetic racism and resurgent authoritarianism, the mechanics of Hitler's rise are a particularly pressing matter. For dismantlers of democracy, there is no better exemplar. Since 1945, the historiography of Nazism has undergone several broad transformations, reflecting political pressures both within Germany and abroad. This was the other part. From boyhood on, Hitler devoured the westerns of the popular German novelist Karl May. In 1928, Hitler remarked approvingly that white settlers in America had gunned down the millions of redskins to a few 100,000. When he spoke of Lebensraum, the German drive for living space in Eastern Europe, he often had America in mind, Manifest Destiny. Among recent books on Nazism, the one that may prove most disquieting for American readers is James Q. Whitman's Hitler's American Model, the United States and the Making of a Nazi Race Law. On the cover, the inevitable swastika is flanked by two red stars. Whitman methodically explores how Nazis took inspiration from American racism of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He notes that in Mein Kampf, Hitler praises America as the one state that has made progress towards... I read this part already. So what Mahmoud, Zohran's father, is saying there is objectively correct. It's just correct. And yet, in a world where truth does not matter, in a world where truth does not matter, you can take an objectively correct statement such as this one, an accurate reflection of historical events and the roles that the American racialized structure of nationality played in Hitler's very own design in the aftermath, in a post-Nuremberg race law world for Germany. You can just say, how dare you, and then move on, and people will go along with it. It is fucking insane to me. This is why I often bring up that one Jewish professor of anti-colonial history that was suspended recently. And he was suspended because there was a literal Unit 8200 IDF veteran in his class that was not only harassing the students, but filming them. Okay? And why was he doing that? Because the Israel Knesset grant-funded Canary mission had singled him out alongside Congressperson Richie Torres. Remember, this is a Jewish American professor of anti-colonial history. Why had they singled him out as an op, as someone that must be removed from their position in academia? Because he correctly said that Hamas is a national emancipatory resistance group that only operates within the confines of historic Palestine. That is the truth. We are supposed to be able to say the truth in classrooms. Especially in classrooms, especially in fucking academia, in like in college campuses. What the fuck? It is crazy that these guys can just turn around and be like, oh, what you said is the truth, but it offends me and I don't like it. And there are plenty of people that go along with it because they've been propagandized into thinking, no, these are barbaric slaughter monsters. How dare you say that there is a logical through line to their acts of militant resistance? Genuine question, logs, please. Isn't most of Americans uneducated? My genuine question, and I hope I'm wrong, wouldn't all these attacks be effective against Zohran and make him lose the election? No. So far, this has been ineffective. or at least has had limited effect. If Zohran also wasn't Zohran Mamdani, a brown Muslim guy, and instead was a white boy whose white father was in academia, this wouldn't work at all. It's insane because, like your pal Matt Walsh, you've never actually studied history. You MAGA folks revel in your ignorance and then act shocked and call educated scholars like Mahmoud Mamdani insane. As Pulitzer Prize-winning author John Tolland notes in his book Adolf Hitler, Hitler's concept of concentration camps, as well as the practicality of genocide, owed so much, so he claimed, to his studies of English and United States history. He admired the camps for Boer prisoners in South Africa and for the Indians in the Wild West, and often praised to his inner circle the efficiency of America's extermination by starvation and uneven combat of the red savages who could not be tamed by captivity. Yeah, this is one of the most insane things I've ever heard, Dave Rubin says. And I say that as someone who used to work at the Young Turks. It's mind-boggling. This is not just a war against the truth. It's Republicans have successfully, and Americans by and large, it's not just Republicans, but like American elites have successfully waged war against critical thinking. And they've won. They've won. And you can tweak the algorithm like this so that Dave Rubin's post gets 37,000 likes and Mehdi Hassan's correction gets 3,000 likes. Do you understand? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the false narratives that Republicans lean into? How do you deal with the largest swaths of American society putting their own personal feelings and what they've like maybe half heard or half remembered from their shitty education? How do you put that against people who are invested in the truth? I don't know the answer to it, but I'm not going to stop. Abandon the site. We need to dump capitalist social media entirety. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Stop. Oh my God, I'm starting to get pissed off. Yes, dude. We must close our eyes and plug our ears to where people congregate, to where people talk to one another, because people are too stupid. We must actually cut our movement in half. We must actually do everything we can to gatekeep, live in our own fucking commune. Self-isolation is not the answer to this, okay? You just have to keep fighting because you have no other option. That's it. You have to keep fighting wherever that battle may take, no matter how the institutional power is aligned against you. It doesn't fucking matter. There's nothing else you can do.
That was a character witness for the blind sheikh who was, convicted in the 93 World Trade Center bombing. This is a guy that for weeks and months on end would not condemn the call for global intifada. You heard the montage. He's offering pretty much everything for free, condemning billionaires as people that shouldn't exist, and pledging to confiscate wealth and raise taxes on everybody, and everything's going to be free. This is going to be a case study. Mar's right. And it's going to have great implications because he will not be able to fulfill those promises. The Obamacare promises never fulfilled. Social Security is going bankrupt. Government schools in most blue states and cities are crap. They failed miserably. Defund, dismantle, no bail, reimagine has failed miserably. Open borders has failed miserably. So
I would say we need a new app where the algo isn't abusive to the truth, not abandoning it, but competing against it. Brother, who? With whose money? On whose servers? Who's making this happen? Oh my God, this is where the blue sky truthers come out. Jesus Christ. Oh. People thinking Hassan radicalizes Chat. Meanwhile, Chat trying to radicalize him. No, they can't. They can't radicalize someone who is already a radical, but has a more pragmatic approach to what must be done. This is simply a difference in opinion in tactics and methods. That's all it is.
America's going to get to judge this. I think it may be a good thing in a weird way. Thought on that?
Yeah, look, what you just said there, that Bill Maher is right, that's something I don't say all that often, although I got to say I'm saying it more and more often because Maher is an old school liberal who actually believes in things like free speech, who doesn't want to see the Democrat Party become a communist party. And I think America is better when you have two parties that are somewhere reasonably near the middle and you can have disagreements. I don't think it's good for America when one of the two parties is absolutely nuts. You mentioned Comrade Mamdani's father. I played on my podcast, Verdict with Ted Cruz, today's entire...
So you see no value and we're going to make X irrelevant?
podcast is on Mamdani and laying out his radical record. His father also said that Abraham Lincoln was the model for Adolf Hitler. Now, I want you to stop and think, how much do you hate America if you say that Adolf Hitler modeled his behavior after Abraham Lincoln? That is who Comrade Mamdani suckled after. And I'm just hoping, New Yorkers, we don't want to see an enormously important city run by someone who hates America, who blames, who thinks Lincoln and Adolf Hitler are comparable. I'm just praying that there's a moment of pulling back and saying, this doesn't make any sense because the alternative is really bad for our country.
Let me ask you. You know, J.D. Vance, the vice president, slammed Mamdani for making his auntie the real victim of 9/11.
Yeah.
I never saw him cry over the people that died that day or their families.
Brother, he was 9 years old. He was 9 years old. He was 9 years old on 9/11 in New York. If your attitude is that everyone in New York suffered on 9/11, then Zohran is a part of everyone. The problem is, when these guys cynically say everyone suffered on 9/11, they don't mean everyone suffered on a 9/11. They don't think that Muslims are a part of the in-group, okay? Even a 9-year-old Muslim boy.
Not a word.
20 seconds.
Not a word. Look, not a word, and you should not be cheering on the jihadists who flew the planes into the buildings. You should be standing up for the people of New York. And Mamdani will not do that. I very much hope and pray he loses.
Okay, Senator, appreciate it.
Don't understand it. Why wouldn't you want him to win so that you can say the entire Democratic Party is like this? By the way, Ted Cruz, I know one person who was cheering on 9/11, or at least jorking his fucking penis on 9/11, and that man is Ted Cruz. That's what Ted Cruz was doing on 9/11. You know, many years after the fact, but if you remember, he accidentally publicly liked porn on 9/11 a couple years ago. Yeah, so he did do that. That's how he was choosing to honor the memory of the fallen. Corey Chase incest porn, no less. Yep. He was fucking horny on Maine, dude. Yep. Ted Cruz Twitter account likes pornographic tweet. Married Texas senator who once defended a ban on sex toys asked to explain how his account came to like the graphic post. from sexual posts. Be careful showing this. I mean, it's censored. Obviously, it's on The Guardian, dude. Yeah. He was trying to raise a tower of his own. He was trying to erect. Your Honor, I was trying to erect my very own tower in honor. A little bit of porn-a-rooney on 9/11. Gets me going. Someone posted a screenshot of when Hassan changed his Twitter name to it too. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Ted Cruz actually retweeted me once, and I changed my name to Ted Cruz liked porn on 9/11.